Amara thought marriage to Chinedu was her escape from a troubled past until one mistake tied her forever to his powerful father, Chief Okonkwo. Please, if you're new to this channel, just subscribe now and say it in the comment section. The first time Amara stepped into the Okonkwo mansion, she believed her life had finally begun. The tall gates opened slowly, almost ceremoniously, revealing a compound so vast it felt like its own kingdom. The house itself stood like a monument, white walls gleaming under the sun, pillars stretching high, and glass windows reflecting a life she had only ever imagined from a distance. "You'll get used to it," Chinedu had said casually, adjusting his wristwatch as if wealth bored him. Amara had smiled then, clutching her small handbag tightly. "It's beautiful," she whispered. But beauty, she would later learn, could hide things far uglier beneath. At first, marriage felt like a dream. Friends envied her. Relatives praised her luck. She was the woman who had married into power, into wealth, into influence. Chief Okonkwo's name alone opened doors that others couldn't even knock on. But inside the marriage, there was a silence that grew louder each day. Chinedu was rarely home. Meetings, contracts, travels, his life was always somewhere else. When he was present, he was distracted, glued to his phone or laptop, answering emails even during dinner. "Are you even listening to me?" Amara had asked one evening, her voice soft but strained. Chinedu barely looked up. Yes, continue." She stopped talking. That night, she lay beside him, staring at the ceiling while he slept peacefully. The space between them felt wider than the ocean. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. Loneliness became her shadow. The mansion that once felt like a palace now echoed with emptiness. Staff moved around quietly, doing their duties, but none of them were hers to talk to. She was surrounded by people, yet completely alone. It was during one of those long, quiet afternoons that she began to notice Chief Okonkwo more. He was not a man one could ignore. Even in silence, his presence commanded attention. Tall, broad-shouldered despite his age, with a voice that carried authority even when he spoke softly. People feared him. Respected him. Obeyed him. At first, their interactions were formal. "How are you settling in?" he asked one morning at the dining table. "I'm fine, sir," Amara replied, lowering her gaze. He studied her for a moment longer than necessary. "You can call me father." She nodded, though the word felt heavy on her tongue. Over time, those brief exchanges became longer conversations. He began to ask about her day. "You look tired," he remarked once, watching her closely. "I didn't sleep well," she admitted. A young woman should not look so burdened. Something about the way he said it made her chest tighten. No one had noticed her like that before. Not even her husband. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Chief Okonkwo became a constant presence in her lonely world. He would sit with her in the evenings, asking about her childhood, her dreams, her thoughts. He listened, truly listened, in a way Chinedu never did. "You're too intelligent to be this quiet," he told her one day. Amara gave a small laugh. "I don't have much to say." "That's not true," he replied firmly. "You've just never been given the space to speak." His words lingered in her mind long after he left. For the first time in months, she felt seen. And that frightened her. She tried to pull away. Whenever she noticed herself lingering too long in his presence, she would find an excuse to leave. Whenever their conversations became too personal, she would change the topic. But Chief Okonkwo was not a man easily avoided. He always found his way back into her space. One evening, rain poured heavily against the windows, trapping everyone indoors. The power flickered briefly before stabilizing. The house felt different, quieter, almost intimate. Amara sat alone in the living room, watching the rain. "You like the rain?" his voice came from behind her. She turned, startled. "I didn't hear you come in." He smiled slightly. You were lost in thought. She nodded. It's calming. He walked closer, standing beside her. Or maybe it reminds you of something. She looked at him, confused. Loneliness, he said simply. Her breath caught. You think I don't see it, he continued. The way you move around this house like a guest, not a wife. Amara swallowed hard. I'm fine. No, you're not. The certainty in his voice broke something inside her. Before she could stop herself, she spoke. He's never here. Chief Okonkwo's gaze softened, but only slightly. Chinedu has always been like that. That doesn't make it easier. Silence fell between them, heavy and charged. The rain grew louder. I warned him, Chief Okonkwo said after a moment. A woman is not something you leave unattended. Amara frowned. I'm not. You're human, he interrupted. You need attention. Care. Presence. The way he said it made her uneasy. She stood abruptly. I should go. But as she turned, his hand caught her wrist. Not roughly, but firmly. Her heart began to race. Amara, he said quietly, do you know how long I've watched you suffer in silence? She pulled slightly, but he didn't let go. This is wrong, she whispered. Is it? He asked. Yes. But you're unhappy. That doesn't justify. Doesn't it? His voice dropped, low and persuasive. For a moment, her thoughts blurred. Loneliness. Neglect. Silence. Everything she had buried rose to the surface at once. I shouldn't be here, she said again, weaker this time. But she didn't move. And neither did he. What happened that night didn't feel like a single decision. It felt like a series of small moments, hesitation, vulnerability, confusion, that led her somewhere she never imagined she would go. Afterwards, reality came crashing back. Amara sat at the edge of the bed, her hands trembling. What have I done? She whispered. Chief Okonkwo adjusted his cufflinks calmly, as though nothing extraordinary had occurred. What needed to happen? She turned to him, tears forming in her eyes. This is a mistake. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. No. This is consequence. Of what? Neglect. Weakness. Opportunity. His words felt like a slap. I'm not coming back here, she said quickly, standing up. He didn't argue. He simply watched her. That was what unsettled her the most. The lack of resistance. The quiet confidence in his eyes. As if he knew something she didn't. Days passed. Amara avoided him completely. She stayed in her room, kept interactions with staff minimal, and ignored the heavy presence she could feel whenever he was nearby. Chinedu remained unaware. Or perhaps he simply didn't care enough to notice. But inside her, something had changed. Guilt settled deep in her chest, refusing to leave. Every time she looked at her husband, she felt like she was carrying a secret too heavy to bear. Then came the nausea. At first, she dismissed it. Stress, she told herself. But when it persisted, when her body began to feel unfamiliar, she couldn't ignore it anymore. Her hands shook as she stood in the bathroom, staring at the small white stick in her hand. Her heart pounded so loudly it drowned out every other sound. This can't be happening, she whispered. Minutes felt like hours. Then, 2 lines. Clear. Unmistakable. Positive. The room spun. Amara gripped the sink for support, her reflection staring back at her like a stranger. Tears slid down her cheeks as the truth settled in. There was no confusion. No doubt. No escape from the reality pressing down on her. The pregnancy test read positive, and I knew instantly, this child was not my husband's. The memory refused to leave her. It clung to her like a shadow, replaying in fragments no matter how hard Amara tried to push it away. Every glance at Chief Okonkwo across the dining table, every echo of his voice in the hallway, every silence in her marriage, it all led her back to that night. She had told herself it was a mistake. A moment of weakness. But deep down, she knew it wasn't that simple. It started long before the rain. It started with loneliness. Days after her wedding, Amara had imagined laughter filling the halls, imagined shared dinners, whispered conversations, and the warmth of companionship. Instead, she got absence. Cold routines. A husband who treated marriage like an obligation he had already fulfilled. Business doesn't wait, Amara, Chinedu would say whenever she tried to complain. And what about me, she had once asked. He sighed, irritated. Don't start. That was always the end of the conversation. Don't start. As if her feelings were an inconvenience. As if she didn't matter. At first, she blamed herself. Maybe she expected too much. Maybe she wasn't patient enough. Maybe this was just how marriages worked in families like his, structured, distant, practical. But then came the subtle changes. Chief Okonkwo began to notice things Chinedu never did. You didn't eat, he observed one afternoon, his eye scanning the untouched plate in front of her. I'm not hungry, she replied. You should be. She forced a smile. I'll eat later. He didn't argue. He simply pushed the plate slightly closer to her. Eat now. There was authority in his tone, but something else too, something that felt almost like concern. And against her better judgment, she obeyed. Moments like that became frequent. He would notice when she was quiet, when she was distracted, when her smile didn't reach her eyes. He asked questions, not casually, but intentionally. Are you happy here? He asked one evening, his gaze steady. Amara hesitated. Of course. He tilted his head slightly. You're lying. Her breath caught. No, You don't have to pretend with me, he said softly. That was the first time she felt it. That dangerous sense of being understood. From then on, the lines began to blur. At first, it was harmless. Conversations that lasted longer than necessary. Moments of silence that felt too comfortable. Glances that lingered just a second too long. Amara noticed it. And she tried to stop it. She started avoiding the dining room when she knew he would be there. She stayed in her room more often, kept herself busy with meaningless tasks, anything to create distance. But avoidance only made things worse. Because when they did meet, the tension was stronger. He noticed. Of course he did. You've been avoiding me, he said one morning, catching her just as she was about to leave the kitchen. I've been busy, she replied quickly. With what? She didn't have an answer. He stepped closer. Not enough to touch her. But enough to make her aware of his presence. You don't need to run from me, Amara. I'm not running. You are. His voice was calm, but firm. And for a moment, she felt exposed. I'm your daughter-in-law, she said, as if reminding both of them. Yes, he replied. But the way he said it didn't feel like agreement. It felt like dismissal. That was when fear began to mix with everything else. Because she realized something important. Chief Okonkwo was not a man who accepted boundaries. He was a man who moved them. And slowly, carefully, he began to shift hers. The night everything changed wasn't planned. At least, not by her. It was one of those nights when the house felt too quiet. Chinedu had traveled again, another meeting, another deal, another excuse. Amara sat in her room, scrolling through her phone without seeing anything. The silence pressed down on her, heavy and suffocating. A knock came at the door. Her heart skipped. She knew who it was before she even opened it. Chief Okonkwo stood there, composed as always. "I thought you might want some company," he said. "I'm fine," she replied quickly. He studied her face. "You don't look fine." "I just want to rest." He didn't move. And then, without waiting for permission, he stepped inside. Amara's chest tightened. "You shouldn't be here," she said, closing the door behind him instinctively, as if afraid someone might see. "No one will disturb us," he replied. "That's not the point." "Then what is?" She hesitated. Because she didn't fully understand it herself. It wasn't just fear. It was something deeper. Something more complicated. "This isn't right," she said finally. He nodded slightly. "Right and wrong are flexible concepts." "No, they're not." "They are," he said calmly. "Especially in families like this." She shook her head. "I don't want this." He stepped closer. "Then why are you still standing here?" Her breath caught. Because she didn't have an answer. Because part of her, no matter how much she hated it, felt drawn to him. Not to him as a person, but to what he represented. Attention. Control. Presence. Everything her husband lacked. "You're confused," he said softly. "I'm not." "You are," he interrupted gently. "And that's okay." His hand lifted slightly, hovering near her face. She should have stepped back. She should have stopped him. But she didn't. "I can give you what he cannot," he said. Those words broke something inside her. Not because they were true, but because she had already begun to believe them. And in that moment, she made a choice she would regret for the rest of her life. Or perhaps she stopped fighting the choice she had already been making all along. After that night, everything changed. Chief Okonkwo didn't treat it like a mistake. He treated it like an understanding. An unspoken agreement. And that terrified her. She avoided him even more, but now it felt different. Now, there was something between them. Something heavy. Something undeniable. But he didn't chase her. He didn't pressure her. He simply watched. Waited. And when their paths crossed, his eyes held a quiet certainty that made her uneasy. As if he knew she couldn't escape what had already begun. Days later, when she tried to confront him, her voice shook. "This has to stop," she said. He looked at her calmly. "It already started." "That doesn't mean it continues." "It does," he replied. "No, it doesn't." Her voice cracked. For the first time, his expression hardened slightly. "You think you can walk away from this?" he asked. "Yes." He took a step closer. "You don't understand the position you're in." "I understand enough." "No," he said quietly. "You don't." There was something in his tone that made her stomach drop. Something deeper than authority. Something darker. She took a step back. "I won't do this again," she said firmly. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he smiled. Not warmly. Not kindly. But knowingly. "We'll see." That was when fear truly set in. Because it no longer felt like a mistake. It felt like something she had been pulled into. Something she didn't fully control. And then, the pregnancy. The moment she realized what it meant, everything else became clearer. The way he looked at her. The confidence. The certainty. It wasn't just about desire. It was about power. When she finally gathered the courage to face him, her hands trembled. "I'm pregnant," she said. For a brief moment, silence filled the room. Then, he smiled. Not surprised. Not shocked. Satisfied. "I know," he said. Her heart stopped. What do you mean, you know? He stepped closer, his voice low. That child, he said, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder, is my legacy. Amara felt the world tilt beneath her feet. No, she whispered. You will protect it, he continued, his tone now firm, commanding. I won't. You will, he said, cutting her off. There was no anger in his voice. No raised tone. Just certainty. And that made it even more terrifying. Amara shook her head, backing away. This is not your decision. It is, he replied calmly. No, it's mine. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he spoke again. You're part of this family now, Amara. His voice dropped slightly. And in this family, we protect what belongs to us. A chill ran down her spine. Because in that moment, she understood something she hadn't before. This wasn't just about her. It wasn't just about the child. It was about control. And she had just become part of a game she didn't know how to play. Amara didn't sleep that night. Or the night after. Or the one after that. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw two lines, bright, undeniable, unforgiving. Every time she opened them, she felt the walls of the mansion closing in on her, as if the house itself knew her secret and was waiting for the moment it would consume her whole. She couldn't keep it inside. She thought about running. Packing a bag. Leaving before dawn. Disappearing into a life where none of this had happened. But where would she go? And how far could she run from something growing inside her? By the fourth day, she made her decision. She would tell Chinedu. It felt like the only thing left that still belonged to her, the truth. Even if it destroyed everything. That evening, Chinedu returned home earlier than usual. Amara heard the sound of his car pulling into the compound, the familiar hum of the engine cutting off, followed by the distant murmur of security greeting him. Her chest tightened. This was it. She stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. Her eyes looked tired, haunted. She placed a hand lightly on her stomach, her fingers trembling. I can do this, she whispered. But the words felt hollow. When Chinedu entered the room, he looked exactly the same as always, composed, sharp, untouched by the chaos that had taken over her world. You're home early, she said, her voice barely steady. Meeting got cancelled, he replied, loosening his tie. Why do you look like that? Like what? Like something is wrong. She let out a dry laugh. Something is wrong. He paused, glancing at her properly now. What is it? There was no warmth in his tone. Just curiosity. Like he was asking about a business deal. Amara swallowed hard. Can we talk? Chinedu sighed, already sounding impatient. Can it wait? I'm tired. No, she said quickly. It can't. Something in her voice made him stop. He dropped his briefcase on the table and sat down, gesturing for her to continue. Okay. Talk. Amara stood there for a moment, her heart pounding so loudly she thought he might hear it. Then she spoke. I'm pregnant. Silence. Chinedu blinked once, processing the words. Then he leaned back slightly, exhaling. And, he said, why do you look like someone died? That's not exactly bad news. Amara's throat tightened. Because this was the moment. The point of no return. It's not yours. The words fell into the room like a bomb. Heavy. Destructive. Irreversible. Chinedu didn't react immediately. He just stared at her. Still. Silent. Too silent. Amara's breath became uneven. Say something. He tilted his head slightly, as if studying her. Not mine, he repeated. She nodded slowly, tears forming in her eyes. "I'm sorry." Still nothing. No anger. No shouting. No shock. Just that same calm expression. And suddenly, that calmness became more terrifying than any rage could have been. "Who?" he asked. His voice was steady. Controlled. Amara hesitated. Because saying it out loud would make it real in a way nothing else had. But she had already come this far. "There's no point hiding it," she whispered. Chinedu's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then don't." Her lips trembled. "It's your father." The silence that followed was suffocating. Amara braced herself. She expected him to explode. To shout. To break something. To do something. But instead, Chinedu chuckled. Softly. As if she had just said something mildly amusing. Amara froze. "What?" she whispered. He shook his head slowly, standing up. "I knew it," he said under his breath. Her heart skipped. "You knew." "Not everything," he admitted. "But enough." Amara stared at him, confusion mixing with fear. "What are you talking about?" Chinedu walked past her, pouring himself a. For 3 days, Amara carried the truth like a weight tied around her neck, dragging her deeper into silence. Every movement felt heavy, every breath strained. The walls of the mansion seemed to close in on her, watching, listening, suffocating her with secrets she could no longer contain. She avoided mirrors. Because each time she looked at herself, she saw a stranger, a woman trapped between guilt and fear, between truth and survival. Chinedu returned on the 4th day. She heard his car before she saw him. The familiar sound of tires rolling into the compound made her heart race violently. Her palms grew sweaty, her chest tight. This was it. No more hiding. No more pretending. She stood in the living room, waiting. When he walked in, he looked exactly the same, sharp suit, composed expression, phone in hand, already halfway into another conversation. "I just got back," he said briefly, not even looking at her. "I need to shower. I have another call in 30 minutes. Amara stared at him. For a moment, she almost laughed. Because it felt absurd. Her world was collapsing, and his hadn't even paused. "Chinedu," she said, her voice shaky. He hummed absent-mindedly. "I need to talk to you." That made him look up. Something in her tone caught his attention. "Now?" he asked. "Yes. Now." He studied her face for a moment, then sighed, loosening his tie. "Fine. Make it quick. Make it quick." The word stung. But she swallowed the pain. Because this was bigger than hurt feelings. "Sit down," she said. He raised an eyebrow but obliged, dropping his phone on the table and sitting across from her. The silence stretched. Amara's heart pounded so loudly she was sure he could hear it. "Amara, what is this about?" he asked, impatience creeping into his voice. She took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." For a split second, something flickered across his face. Surprise. But it disappeared quickly. "Oh," he said simply. Amara blinked. "Oh?" "That's unexpected," he added, leaning back slightly. "But it's not a bad thing." Her chest tightened. "You don't seem surprised," she said slowly. He shrugged. "We're married. It was bound to happen." She shook her head. "No, you don't understand." His gaze sharpened slightly. "What do you mean?" Her hands trembled as she clasped them together. "This child," her voice cracked, "it's not yours." Silence. Heavy. Still. The air in the room seemed to freeze. Amara braced herself. For anger. For shouting. For something. Anything. But Chinedu didn't react. He didn't move. Didn't speak. He just looked at her. And that terrified her more than anything. Say something, she whispered. Still nothing. His calmness felt unnatural. Unsettling. Finally, he exhaled slowly and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. How long? He asked quietly. The question caught her off guard. What? How long has it been going on? Her throat went dry. It wasn't. How long, Amara? His voice was still calm. Too calm. Just once, she said quickly. It only happened once. He nodded slowly, as if processing the information. Then he stood up. Amara's heart jumped. Here it comes, she thought. But instead of exploding, he walked toward the window, his back facing her. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, I suspected. The words hit her like a slap. What? He turned slightly, his expression unreadable. I suspected something was off. Her mind reeled. You knew. Not knew, he corrected. But I had my doubts. Amara shook her head, confused. How? He let out a quiet, almost humorless laugh. You think I don't know my own father? Her stomach dropped. You're not making sense. Chinedu turned fully to face her now. There was something in his eyes she had never seen before. Not anger. Not pain. Something colder. He's done this before, he said. The room seemed to tilt. What? He has a way of, he paused, choosing his words carefully, taking what he wants. Amara's chest tightened painfully. And you just, what? Ignored it, she asked, her voice rising. I observed. That's not normal, she snapped. That's not something you just watch. His expression hardened slightly. Lower your voice. No, she stood up abruptly. You don't get to tell me to be calm. Do you even hear yourself? He walked toward her slowly. Measured. Controlled. You're emotional, he said. Of course I am. I'm pregnant with your father's child. The words echoed in the room. But still. No rage. No shock. Just that same unsettling calm. You don't get to ruin this family, Amara, he said quietly. Her breath caught. What? Not after everything my father has done for us. She stared at him, disbelief flooding her face. Ruin this family, she repeated. You think I'm the problem here? This situation, he clarified, is a problem. And whose fault is that? He didn't answer. And that silence spoke louder than anything. Amara felt something inside her crack. You're blaming me, she said slowly. I'm being realistic. Realistic, she let out a bitter laugh. Your father, your own father, slept with your wife, and you're talking about being realistic. His jaw tightened slightly. Lower your voice, he repeated. Or what? She challenged. You'll finally react. For a brief moment, something flickered in his eyes. But it disappeared just as quickly. You need to think carefully about what happens next, he said. Her anger faltered, replaced by confusion. What does that mean? It means, he continued, this doesn't leave this house. Her heart skipped. No. Yes. No, she shook her head, backing away. I'm not hiding this. I'm not protecting him. You don't have a choice. I do. You don't, he said firmly. Something in his tone made her freeze. Why are you doing this? She whispered. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. Because I understand how this family works. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. Amara felt tears sting her eyes. This is wrong, she said, her voice breaking. Everything about this is wrong. He didn't respond. Say something, she cried. Show me you care. Show me this matters to you. Silence. That same suffocating silence. And in that moment, she realized something far worse than betrayal. Chinedu wasn't just accepting this. He was adapting to it. You're just like him, she whispered. That made him react. Just slightly. His eyes darkened. Don't say that. But it's true, she continued, her voice trembling. You're not angry. You're not hurt. You're thinking, calculating, just like him. He stepped closer, his presence suddenly overwhelming. You don't understand the position you're in, he said. Her breath hitched. No, she replied quietly. I think I'm starting to. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he spoke again. This child, he said slowly, doesn't change anything. Amara felt her heart shatter. It changes everything, she whispered. He shook his head. Only if you let it. Tears slipped down her cheeks. You're asking me to pretend. I'm telling you to survive. The words sent a chill down her spine. Because they didn't sound like advice. They sounded like a warning. And if I don't, she asked softly. He looked at her. Really looked at her. And for the first time, she saw it clearly. Not indifference. Not confusion. But something far more dangerous. Control. Then you'll learn, he said quietly, that some truths are better buried. The room fell silent again. But this time, it wasn't just heavy. It was suffocating. Because Amara finally understood. She hadn't just married into wealth. She had married into something far darker. And the truth she thought would set her free had just trapped her even deeper. Amara stopped expecting help after that night. Hope, she realized, was dangerous in a place like this. It made you believe escape was possible when every door around you was quietly locked. After her confession, something in the house shifted, not visibly, not in a way anyone could point to, but she felt it in the air, in the way conversations died when she entered a room. In the way footsteps seemed to follow her even when she walked alone. Nothing was said openly. And that was the most terrifying part. The next morning, everything looked normal. Breakfast was served as usual. Staff moved about with their quiet efficiency. The sun streamed through the large windows, illuminating polished floors and spotless furniture. But underneath it all, something had changed. Amara sat at the dining table, her appetite gone. She hadn't seen Chinedu since the night before. His side of the table was empty, his absence as cold as his presence. Madam, should I bring tea? One of the housemaids asked gently. Amara nodded absent-mindedly. As the maid walked away, Amara felt it. That presence. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. Chief Okonkwo. Good morning, he said, his voice calm, almost pleasant. Amara's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. Good morning, sir, she replied quietly. He took his seat at the head of the table, unfolding his napkin as if nothing in the world had changed. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, you told him. It wasn't a question. Amara's breath caught. She looked up slowly. Yes. He nodded once, as if confirming something he already knew. And, he asked. Her chest tightened. He knows. I expected that. The ease in his tone made her stomach turn. You expected this? She asked, her voice shaking. Chief Okonkwo picked up his cup of tea, taking a slow sip before responding. My son is not an emotional man. That's your explanation, she snapped softly. That is not emotional. He set the cup down carefully. He understands what is important. Amara stared at him, disbelief flooding her expression. And what is important? She demanded. He met her gaze steadily. Stability. Legacy. Control. Each word landed like a weight on her chest. This isn't about control, she said, her voice rising slightly. This is about what you did. What we did, he corrected calmly. Amara froze. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Because deep down, she knew that was the truth she didn't want to face. It hadn't been forced. It hadn't been entirely his doing. And that realization made everything worse. You manipulated me, she said finally, her voice weaker now. A faint smile touched his lips. Did I? Her hands trembled. You knew I was vulnerable. And you knew it was wrong. Silence. The truth sat between them, heavy and suffocating. Amara looked away. I'm not doing this with you, she muttered. You already are, he replied. She stood abruptly, pushing her chair back. I won't protect you, she said firmly. I won't pretend like this didn't happen. Chief Okonkwo didn't move. Didn't react. You don't have to pretend, he said. She frowned. What does that mean? It means, he continued, his voice steady, no one outside this house needs to know. Her heart dropped. There are people who will believe me. Who? He asked simply. Amara opened her mouth. Then closed it. Because the answer wasn't as clear as she wanted it to be. Her family? They would panic. But would they stand against Chief Okonkwo? Her friends? Most of them admired her marriage, envied her life. Would they believe something like this? Or would they think she was trying to destroy her own home? You see, he said quietly, truth is not always about what happened. It's about what people are willing to accept. Amara felt a chill run down her spine. You can't control everything, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. He held her gaze. I don't need to control everything, he replied. Just enough. The weight of his words settled deep inside her. And for the first time, she truly understood the scale of what she was dealing with. This wasn't just a man. This was power. And power didn't beg. It didn't explain. It simply existed, and expected obedience. That afternoon, Chinedu finally returned. Amara heard him before she saw him, his footsteps steady, unhurried. When he entered the living room, he looked exactly as he had the day before, composed, controlled, untouched. We need to talk, she said immediately. He glanced at her briefly. We already did. No, she said, shaking her head. You spoke. I listened. Now I'm speaking. He sighed, clearly uninterested, but sat down anyway. Fine. Talk. Amara stood in front of him, her heart pounding. I'm not staying here, she said. That got his attention. His eyes lifted, sharp and focused. What? I'm leaving, she continued. This house, this family, I'm done. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Chinedu leaned back slowly. No, you're not. Her chest tightened. You don't get to decide that. I already have. Amara shook her head, anger rising. You think you can control me too? His expression remained calm. I think you don't understand the consequences of your actions. My actions, she repeated, disbelief in her voice. Your father. Lower your voice. No. Her voice echoed through the room. I'm not afraid of you. Chinedu stood up. Slowly. Deliberately. And suddenly, the space between them felt dangerous. You should be careful what you say, he said quietly. A chill ran down her spine. Is that a threat? She asked. It's advice. She laughed bitterly. "You're unbelievable." "No," he replied calmly. "I'm realistic." Amara stared at him, searching his face for any sign of the man she thought she married. But she found nothing. Just cold calculation. "You're just like him," she whispered. He didn't deny it this time. And that terrified her more than anything. Before she could respond, a voice came from the doorway. "That's enough." Amara turned. Chief Okonkwo stood there, his presence filling the room instantly. The air shifted. Tightened. "You're upsetting yourself unnecessarily," he said, walking in slowly. Amara stepped back instinctively. "I'm not the one causing problems," she said. "No," he replied. "You're just reacting to them poorly." Her hand clenched into fists. "You don't get to tell me how to react." "I do," he said simply. The certainty in his voice made her chest tighten. "No, you don't," she shot back. "I'm not yours to control." Chief Okonkwo stopped a few steps away from her. For a moment, he just looked at her. Then he spoke. "Everyone in this house is under my control." The words were calm. But they carried a weight that pressed down on her chest. "That's not normal," she said, her voice shaking. "It's necessary." "For what?" "Power." "For order." Amara felt her breath quicken. "This isn't order," she said. "This is survival," Chinedu interrupted. She turned to him, disbelief flooding her face. "You both sound insane." Neither of them responded. And that silence said everything. Amara felt something shift inside her. Fear. Real fear. Not just of what had happened, but of what could happen next. That evening, she stayed in her room. She locked the door. Checked it twice. Then sat on the edge of her bed, her mind racing. She needed a way out. A real one. Not just threats. Not just words. As she sat there, she heard voices outside. Faint. Distant. But enough. She moved closer to the door, her heart pounding, and listened. "She's becoming a problem," Chinedu's voice said. Amara froze. "Then she needs to be handled," Chief Okonkwo replied. Her breath caught. "Handled? What about the pregnancy?" Chinedu asked. A pause. Then, "We protect the child," Chief Okonkwo said. "But we control the situation." Amara's heart slammed against her chest. Control. That word again. "And if she refuses?" Chinedu asked. Silence. Heavy. Then Chief Okonkwo spoke again. "She won't." His voice was calm. Certain. Dangerous. Amara stepped back from the door, her hands trembling. Because in that moment, one thing became painfully clear. This was no longer just about secrets. It was about survival. And for the first time since everything began, she realized her life might actually be in danger. Amara didn't wait for morning. That night, as the house settled into silence and the echoes of footsteps faded into stillness, she sat on the edge of her bed with one clear thought repeating in her mind. Leave. Not tomorrow. Not later. Now. Her heart pounded as she stood up, moving quickly but quietly. She pulled a small bag from her wardrobe, stuffing in essentials with trembling hands. Clothes. Documents. Her phone charger. Her passport. She hesitated for a second, then reached for it and slipped it into the bag. Her fingers paused over her stomach. "I won't let them trap us," she whispered. For the first time since everything began, her fear began to shift into something else. Resolve. She moved toward the door slowly, pressing her ear against it. Silence. Good. Carefully, she unlocked it and stepped into the hallway. The mansion felt different at night. Darker. Heavier. As if it was watching her. Every step she took felt louder than it should. The soft marble floors echoed faintly beneath her feet, making her chest tighten with every movement. She kept walking. Down the hallway. Past the living room. Closer to the main exit. Freedom was just a few steps away. Then, going somewhere. Amara froze. Her blood ran cold. Slowly, she turned. Chief Okonkwo stood at the bottom of the stairs, his figure half-shadowed but unmistakable. Her grip tightened on her bag. "I'm leaving," she said, forcing her voice to stay steady. He nodded slowly, as if he had expected nothing less. "I figured." Her heart pounded. "Then step aside." He didn't move. Instead, he took a slow step forward. "I don't think you understand your situation," he said. "I understand it perfectly," she shot back. "And I'm done playing whatever game you and your son are running." A faint smile appeared on his lips. "Game," he repeated. "Yes," she said. "Because that's what this is to you, isn't it? Control. Power. Manipulation." He didn't deny it. That scared her more than anything. "This isn't control," he said calmly. "This is structure." "It's a prison," she snapped. "Only if you fight it." Amara shook her head. "I'm not staying here." Before he could respond, another voice entered the room. "She's not going anywhere." Amara turned sharply. "Chinedu." He stood near the entrance, blocking the door. Her chest tightened. "You planned this," she said, her voice low. Neither of them responded. And that silence confirmed everything. "You were watching me," she continued. "We were protecting the family," Chinedu replied. Amara let out a hollow laugh. "Protecting," she repeated. "Is that what you call this?" "Yes." The simplicity of his answer made her stomach twist. "I'm not part of this," she said firmly. "Not anymore." Chinedu stepped closer. "You've been part of this since the moment you married into this house." "No," she shook her head. "I married you. Not this madness. You married everything that comes with me." His voice was calm. Too calm. Always too calm. Amara looked between them, her heart racing. "You're both insane," she said. Chief Okonkwo tilted his head slightly. "Or perhaps," he said, "we just understand how the world works." "And I don't." "You will." The certainty in his voice made her chest tighten. "I don't want to," she said. "That's not your choice." Silence fell. Heavy. Suffocating. Amara felt her options closing in around her. 2 men. 1 door. No escape. Unless... She tightened her grip on her bag. "You think I came unprepared," she said suddenly. That caught their attention. Chinedu frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Amara took a step back, her heart pounding, but her voice steadier now. "I told someone," she said. A flicker of something passed through Chief Okonkwo's eyes. Small. But real. "Who?" Chinedu asked sharply. Amara smiled faintly. "That doesn't matter." "It does," he said, his tone hardening. She shook her head. "What matters is, if anything happens to me," she continued slowly, "everything comes out." Silence. This time, it felt different. Because for the first time, they weren't completely in control. "You're bluffing," Chinedu said. Amara held his gaze. "Try me." The room went still. Chief Okonkwo studied her carefully. "You're smarter than I thought," he said. Amara didn't respond. Because she didn't trust herself to speak. Because the truth was, she wasn't bluffing. Not entirely. Earlier that evening, after overhearing their conversation, she had made one call. Just one. To someone she trusted. Someone outside this house. She hadn't told them everything. But enough. Enough to create a trail. Enough to make her disappearance noticeable. And now, it was her only leverage. You think this changes anything? Chinedu asked. Yes, she said firmly. It changes everything. He shook his head. No. It just complicates things. Good, she replied. Then let it be complicated. For the first time, tension cracked through his calm. You're making a mistake. No, she said. Staying would be the mistake. Silence stretched between them. Then, Chief Okonkwo spoke. Let her go. Chinedu turned sharply. What? I said, let her go. Amara's breath caught. She hadn't expected that. Chinedu frowned. You can't be serious. I am. After everything? Chief Okonkwo's gaze remained steady. She's no use to us like this. The word stung. But Amara didn't react. Because right now, all that mattered was leaving. Chinedu hesitated. Then slowly, he stepped aside. The path to the door was clear. Amara didn't wait. She walked forward, her legs steady despite the storm inside her. As she reached the door, she paused briefly. Then she turned back. Not in fear. Not in hesitation. But in clarity. You think this is over, she said quietly. Neither man spoke. But they listened. Amara placed a hand on her stomach. This child, she continued, is not your legacy. Chief Okonkwo's expression hardened slightly. It's the truth. She held his gaze. And the truth, she added, is something you can't control forever. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then, she opened the door and walked out. The cool night air hit her face as she stepped beyond the gates. For the first time in what felt like forever, she could breathe. Really breathe. Behind her, the mansion stood tall and silent. But it no longer felt like a prison. Because she was no longer inside it. Days later, everything began to unravel. Quietly at first. Then all at once. Whispers. Questions. Doubts. The kind that powerful families tried to bury, but couldn't always contain. Because secrets had a way of surfacing. And this one was too big to stay hidden. Amara didn't look back. She didn't need to. Because she knew something they didn't. Power wasn't just about control. It was about truth. And she was the one carrying it. They thought I was powerless, but they forgot I was the one carrying the truth.